All right, this is lesson 1.6, which is analyzing Andrew Jackson and how he might have represented the common man. This lesson is going to be a little bit different because it doesn't actually have a text that goes along with it. It has a series of four illustrations or drawings, some of which are political cartoons. And hopefully you learned this in the background lecture that you watched at the beginning of the hour. But it's really important that you understand that Andrew Jackson was very different than all the presidents that came before him. Some people actually compare President Trump to Andrew Jackson because of his mannerisms and just the way he goes about running the country. They do have a lot of things in common, not that they are identical, but Andrew Jackson was very blunt, to use a word. He was kind of in your face. He didn't hide his feelings. He kind of said everything the exact way that it was in his mind. He didn't censor himself, and he really didn't take any crap from anybody. Really, he stood up for what he believed in. Whether or not you agree with what he believed in is a whole different thing. But he was definitely not afraid to stand up for what he thought was right and what he wanted to get done. So like I said, there are four cartoons, and it's kind of important. I'll review the learning intention success criteria to kind of guide you into what you're supposed to get out of this lesson. So the learning intention is today we're learning how to analyze and interpret primary sources so that we can better understand how Andrew Jackson differed from most other presidents in U.S. history. It's not just the presidents that came before him, but most of the presidents that came after him were very, very different in terms of the way that they did their job as president, would probably be the nicest way of putting that. So your success criteria, you'll know you're successful when you're able to analyze political cartoons related to Andrew Jackson, and 1, make arguments about how each political cartoon portrays or makes Andrew Jackson look, and then explain if Andrew Jackson actually represented the common man, there's that quote again, using evidence from the documents. So that's the second time I've used the term common man in air quotes, mainly because a lot of people, today and even back then, argue that the President of the United States really doesn't represent the average person. You and me, people that are living every day in a city, they represent either the rich people or they represent, the big interests. They don't really serve us. They serve the people that kind of control them, the campaign donors, the people that help them get elected, more or less. So Andrew Jackson was very different. He argued that he was for the common man, that he was a common man, that he argued that really it was him that was standing up for the little guy, the people that were living in the cities and the people that were living in farms that had gotten kind of the short end of the stick during previous presidencies. And he promised to kind of work for them versus the people that were living in the big houses, the mansions, and had all the money. So if we look at the first cartoon, it's titled, try to get it, I know mine is probably backwards on your end, this one right here. This one is Brave Boy of the Warhawks. And this is... So this is from when he was a child, and in the cartoon, I know it's probably hard to see, you can see that's Andrew Jackson right here, and this is supposedly somebody that was a patriot or was a British soldier coming into his, into his world and kind of forcing him to be a patriot, and him kind of standing up for his beliefs, and kind of rebelling against the king, so to speak. So the caption reads, Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, in 1780, when a boy of 13 years old, enlisted in the cause of his country and was taken prisoner by the British. Being ordered by an officer to clean his boots, he refused and received a sword cut because he stood up for what he believed in and said, "More, I'm not going to clean my shoes. My shoes are, my shoes are clean enough. You're not going to tell me what to do." So this is supposedly designed to show you that he's willing to stand up against the almighty ruler of this country, at the time, and really, was willing to, be his own person and wasn't going to take crap from anybody. Granted, he's supposedly 13 years old in this cartoon, and this is an artist depiction of what actually happened here. Whether or not this actually matches what actually happened is a whole different discussion. But it's designed to kind of show that he, while everyone else in the cartoon is running away and kind of hiding in the corner, brave Andrew Jackson is standing up for his beliefs and, going up to the soldier, and taking him head on, and standing up for himself. The second cartoon, which is on the back side, which is actually one of my favorites, right up here, is has the title "Set Between Old Hickory and Bully Nick." So this is from 1834. So the caption reads, in this cartoon, Andrew Jackson is fighting with quote-unquote bully Nicholas Biddle with his back facing us. That's that guy right here. Beatty supporters are behind him, including Daniel Webster and Henry Clay. So this is, as there's a disagreement in government policies and politics when Andrew Jackson is president, and this shows, or is designed to show, that Andrew Jackson is willing to solve his problems the good old-fashioned way. More or less a good old schoolyard fight in the yard of the White House or wherever it happens to have been, where you can see they both have their shirts off, they're both fighting, and whoever gets the best hits in is going to be really the one who wins the duel and has pride pride points for doing that. It's to show that unlike previous presidents that could, you could maybe argue would never do this, would never want to get their fingernails dirty by doing, participating in an old schoolyard fight. Andrew Jackson was willing to do this and, do it the old-fashioned way. And this, he's no young man at this time. You can kind of see, he's older, but he's still willing to, put his hands up and fight, and to prove that he was stronger and he could beat his opponent. Much much like most of the people in the United States that didn't, at the time at least, didn't settle their differences in court. A lot of people at this time in the early 1800s settled their issues the same way that Andrew Jackson settled them right here in this cartoon. All right, the third cartoon is a little bit easier to understand. It has a simple title. It's called King Andrew. And in case you forgot, we do not have a king in the United States. I'm pretty sure you might remember that. But this is designed to show you, this is somebody that did not necessarily approve of King Andrew in this case. And he's arguing that Andrew Jackson has taken his presidential powers to a new level, and that he's pushing his power to almost the level of a king. So if you look at the cartoon again, if you read around the outside, it says, born to command, much like a king. Had I been consulted, of veto memory, and King Andrew I. And the devil's in the details of this cartoon, to say the least. If you look at the floor, you might see there's a bunch of stuff lying around there, and he happens to be stepping on that stuff, and that's very much an intention. There's never a political cartoon. If there's ever details in a political cartoon, they're there on purpose. They don't draw things just for the sake of drawing them. In this case, if you look really closely, he's not standing on just a bunch of garbage. He's standing on ripped up pieces of the Constitution, which is our form of government. So this guy that is illustrating him is trying to get a point that this king, our president, who's acting like a king, is literally walking over our government and therefore is walking all over us. So this picture is designed to maybe be the opposite viewpoint of a common man, and he sure doesn't look common in this picture. It looks like a king. So his argument of this guy is probably going to be that this is no common man. This is somebody that has led a privileged life, and he's used his power to create even more power for himself. All right. Looking at figure number 4, This one didn't copy well into your books, but hopefully if I remember, I'll put a copy of it on the smartboard so you can see it a little bit better. But you should be able to get the gist of it, because the main idea of this cartoon is really kind of easy to see. It's sitting right in front of you. So figure 4 is called The Great Father, Andrew Jackson, an unknown source in 1835. So somebody, we don't know who drew this or made this, but it was made in 1835. And the note that I gave you was, look very closely at the people in this cartoon. These people down here. And hopefully you'll be able to tell, even though this didn't copy very well, that these are Native Americans. If you look at the way they're presented in this cartoon, he, just like the title says, he appears as like a father figure to them. He has 2 of them sitting on his lap, and they're all sitting around his chair, almost like he's their literal father. And I'm wondering if you know anything else about Andrew Jackson. You might wonder why somebody did that, because during Andrew Jackson's presidency, an event took place called the Trail of Tears, which I'm sure that you're aware of. After I started this lesson, I should have talked to you about it. More or less, where we took a whole bunch of Native Americans and decided that we wanted their land, so we shoved them west. We kept moving them west. I think it was about 1,000 miles, maybe 1,500 miles, and literally forced them to walk from their previous home to where we thought they would be better fit. And it was an absolutely treacherous journey where lots of people died, lots of people got really, really, really sick. People had to leave their belongings at home. They couldn't take a lot of it with them. Imagine if that were you, if tomorrow somebody from the city of Milwaukee just knocked on your door and said, I'm sorry to let you know this, but we're planning on building a new freeway. But don't worry, we have a new house for you. It's 1,000 miles north in Canada. You have a week to get there, and you have to walk. Now imagine that it's January, and you can kind of get an idea of the stress and the horror that these Native Americans experienced during the Trail of Tears. Especially if you consider they didn't have smartphones, there were no rest stops, there were no Walmarts back then for them to, get new supplies. It literally was them going off, hundreds of miles, without any resources and hoping for the best, because America wanted their land, and Andrew Jackson is largely the man in charge of the United States while that happened. So it's kind of ironic. Maybe this is just kind of meant as sarcasm or satire, that he's viewed as Father Andrew, because most Native Americans at the time probably would not call him father, to say the least. They probably had some other choice words for him, but they probably wouldn't have called him father. So the next part of this lesson is I'm asking you to complete this chart right here, which is asking you to kind of compare the political cartoons in the images and kind of match them up with the descriptions and kind of classify them. And then the next question for the documents is I want you to look a little bit into the issue of a national bank. That's really the issue that caused this brawl right here, this schoolyard fight, is the debate over a national bank. I want you to look into that, doing a quick YouTube search. And then by the end of this lesson, after answering a couple more questions, I want you to tell me whether you think that common man would be an appropriate term to use to describe President Andrew Jackson. All right? See you in class.